Commence target practice. As a special treat, you can practice freely on any of the targets in the shooting range today. Shoot away. When you're done, head over to the exit. Welcome to the shooting range. Just the place for a little target practice, huh? When you're done, head over to the exit.
Big boss! My work is done.
What are you talking about?
V for victory! Rocket, peace!
I found Zadornov. I had to kill him.
Huh. So much for our fugitive.
Something's not right here. I'm thinking he had a friend.
Someone inside MSF. Huh?
What's going on?
It's Zeke. It's moving.
What?
There's somebody inside. I can see them. Snake, get up here. Pronto!
Get down from there before you hurt somebody.
Maybe I want to hurt somebody.
What's going on? She's not herself.
Oh, I am myself, all right. My true self.
Kaz, shut that thing down.
I can't! The controls aren't responding!
Then how's it moving?
I made some modifications. This machine was meant to have a human pilot.
Modifications? Kaz, what are you...
Never thought I'd be into machines, huh?
Then Zadornov's escape was a diversion.
Kaz, what are you doing?
I'm taking it back.
Taking it back? Where?
To our leaders. To Cypher.
Cypher?
This weapon is Cypher's creation.
Pause! Get down from there!
Do not call me that. I am Pacifica Ocean. My name, my age, my mission. Cypher gave them all to me. My entire life has but one purpose. To carry out Cypher's plan. The nasty tobacco. The angel of peace crap. The whole teen with a dream routine. I am through with all of it.
Pause. You
I
can't.
told you not to call me that. It makes me want to puke. Everything is gone exactly as we planned. Now the
Real Peace Walker project is finally about to reach its goal.
The real project.
Once upon a time, there were two young men who idolized a hero called the Boss. One day, they suddenly lost the point of origin. This cipher, that was like a mother to them. Unable to come to terms with their sorrow, they each decided to carry on the will of their hero. But they could not agree on what that meant. In the end, they became bitter enemies, and the zero from which they both started was split into two. And you have been on the wrong path ever since. There is no happily ever after waiting for you in the end, unless you obey the will of Cypher. Where does an army without borders call home? A state without borders, of course. A world without borders.
A world without borders.
The Cold War order is about to collapse. The age of electronic intelligence is about to begin. The NSA, CSS, NRO, DIA, etc., etc. The intelligence community that is long bickered amongst itself will be united in a world governed by electrons. Cypher will gather all information, watching over the world and guiding the will of its people, all while they remain blissfully unaware. There will be no one to oppose them. For the first time, the world will be ruled by a single will. Until the new order is in place, you and your army will be the force that protects it. You will be Cypher's deterrent, pulling the wool over the eyes of the old order with your charisma and military prowess. Accept our offer, and we will allow you to retain control of MSF and ZEKE.
That's an offer.
The boss threw down her gun, and with it, her life's calling. You, her disciple, have never been able to do that. You are too afraid to let go.
I was made to fight. I am a gun.
Is that so? Then what do you call this? Is it a gun too? You are a lousy liar. Admit it. This thing is a monstrosity, a product of your own fear. But not Cypher. Cypher thought of something different. Cypher's going to control guns.
Control guns.
That is right. Not deter, control. It is the ultimate approach to the illusion of peace.
Control power. You're gonna be disappointed.
Then we are done. Thank you for playing. Better luck next time. The offer
Is rescinded. And now the ultimatum. ZEKE is already in nuclear strike mode.
What?
I'm taking the weapon you built and using it to launch a nuclear strike on the east coast of the United States.
You're insane. What are you after?
But wait, here is your consolation prize. We are about to show the world just how dangerous a gang of outlaws, an army without borders can be. You and your men will become pariahs, and you will be wiped off the face of the earth. Rather than heroes, you will be seen as a well-armed extremist cult prone to indiscriminate outbursts of nuclear aggression. You will give rise to a new world order, an age of deterrence defined by its fear of extremist cult influence. Do you like the picture I am painting, Big Boss? When all is said and done, peace is nothing but a fantasy. A game is a game. You either win or you lose. All you can do is fight. Stop me if you can. The peace sign is the V of victory. Say, peace.
She's gonna launch a nuke. Snake, we've got to stop her. Whatever it takes. Awaiting your orders. it takes. Awaiting your orders.
Stop me if you can.
Before she can launch that nuke. How could we have been so blind? We activated the hatches on Monday. You can use them as cover so long as they're open. Transport catapult ready to launch. Put Mother Base's gun platforms to use. The control panel is on the edge of the deck. It's out of ammo. Wait for it to reload. And press the attack button. Make sure you're safe by pressing up against the wall. Then use the L1 button to locate the enemy's position, and press the attack button to tag him. Strike group supplies are loaded in the transport catapult. Fire away. First, make sure you're safe by pressing up against the wall. Then use the L1 button to locate the enemy's position, and press the attack button to lock on target. Fire! Transport catapult ready to launch. Getting distracted by the gun platforms. Now's your chance to attack. Big cover is thinner in some areas. Aim for the weak spot. Aim for the AI pod. It's out of ammo. Wait for it to reload. The rocket launcher's reloaded. Let him have it.
one to blame but yourself. Soon you will witness true hell! Soon you will witness true hell!
Supplies are loaded into transport catapults. Fire away!
You've got no one to blame but yourself. Time to wrap things up! Damn your sake! We don't need people. We do not need people.
The gun platform's back up and running. It's all yours. Transport catapult ready to launch. Rocket launcher ready to fire.
Soon you will witness true hell!
Rocket launcher ready to fire. Tag the target first. Press up against the wall. Hold the L1 button and press the attack button.
Soon you will witness true hell! Soon you will witness true hell! Soon you will witness true hell!
Rocket launcher ready to fire.
Time to wrap things up!
Target ignite. Rocket launcher ready to fire.
It's not over yet! Don't do that!
Supplies are loaded in the transport catapult. Fire away. Zeke's getting distracted by the gun platform. Now's your chance to attack. Transport catapult ready to launch.
Time to wrap things up! Take this!
Rocket launcher's reloaded. Let him have it. catapult ready to launch.
No use. Zeke is out of my control. This is where it ends. Listen to me, Big Boss. As long as your army is needed, the world will never know true peace. The peace you'll know will be fleeting, elusive. They will use you, disgrace you, and then finally discard you like they were a cancer to society. This is the path you have chosen.
Who would have thought that little girl was working against us?
Tell me about it. She had everybody fooled, me included. Can't believe I didn't pick up on anything.
Snake, there's no point in beating yourself up over the past. But hey, maybe you should put in some practice against Zeke in case this sort of thing ever happens again. In any case, I need to go talk to Dr. Strangelove. Zeke still isn't ready.
Huey!
How's it going? How's Zeke look?
The attitude control AI had a backup, so it should be able to walk.
Really? Oh, that's good.
Beyond that, it's up to the creator. Stop! Don't come any closer, Doctor.
There's something I've been meaning to ask you. Do you despise me?
Doctor, are you asking me out?
No, not at all.
No? Pity. Because I've just had my heart broken by someone else.
What?
I only like those who can stand on their own. If you fancy me, then come walk with me. Who knows what miracles might happen. Love is blind after all. Take your time. I'll be waiting.
Snake!
That name Paz mentioned at the end, Cipher, it's a code. It means empty. It also means...
Zero.
a world of electronic intelligence, built on codes. And at the center of it all, a zero.
Cuz.
Look, boss. I owe you an apology. Hear me out, okay?
Sure.
I knew Paz and the Professor. I knew who they really were all along.
Cuz.
I used them.
I suppose you were the one that brought them to Columbia in the first place, huh?
Guilty as charged. Paz wasn't just CIA, you know. She was working for the KGB, too. And for this Cipher group. In other words, she was a triple agent.
You knew all of this?
Wait, let me finish. Listen. MSF never would have gotten this big if it weren't for them. This mercenary business we built. Someday it's gonna be a new driving force in the world economy.
Is that your goal all along?
The Cold War's not gonna last forever. Sooner or later it's gonna give way to an era of regional conflicts and terrorism. A paradigm shift from counter-communism to counter-terrorism. In the new age, armies won't be tied to states, and war will become a business. We'll be a valuable commodity. There'll be clients all over the world who need our services. MSF is only the beginning. What we're creating here is a revolution in itself. Am I right?
Cuz. It's not going to be that easy.
What do you mean?
This whole Peace Walker thing has left our mark on the history of the old order. We've put ourselves on the radar of intelligence agencies and governments east and west. The whole world probably knows about us now.
Including that Cipher outfit.
We've let ourselves interfere with the times, with the Cold War system of deterrence. We're an army without a flag. We weren't supposed to take sides in international affairs, but we did.
I see your point. So what happens to us now?
We'll be hunted.
Not everybody's gonna be happy with us, huh?
You're damn right. We upset the global military balance of power.
And these people would rather our army without borders not exist at all?
They're gonna come knocking real soon. There's no turning back now. We're a wrench in the old system of deterrence. As long as the times refuse to change, we're gonna make a hell of a racket.
Then who are we gonna fight?
The establishment. Anybody who tries to restore the old balance wants to snuff us out of existence.
Which establishment?
It won't be a particular country or ideology that hunts us.
Who then?
We're gonna be fighting the biggest beast of all. The Times. 10 years ago, the Times rejected the boss and killed her. And now, we're the ones being tested. Will the Times erase us? Or work with us? It's gonna be a lonely battle. No good or evil. No winners or losers. Business will have to wait. The question we have to ask ourselves now is, can we survive long enough to see the 21st century?
I'm with you, boss. We'll see how it turns out together.
The hunt is on, Kaz. And the whole world's on our tail. Assemble the men.
this world so cold? I just wonder why. Cold as a dog, now my words are frosted with every breath. Still the hate burns wild, growing inside this heart. When the wind changes course, when the stars align, I will reach out to you and leave this all behind. When heavens divide. When heavens divide, I will see the choices within my hands. How can we ever protect and fight with our tiny souls? Let me shine like the sun through the doubts and fear. Do you feel the storm approach as the end draws near? When heavens divide, time will come to softly lay me down. Then I can see a face that I long to see. And for you, only you, I would give anything, leaving a trace for love to find a way. When heavens divide. I will dive into the fire, spilling the blood of my desire. The very last time my name scorched into the sky. When heavens divide, I will see the choices within my hands. How can we ever protect and fight with our tiny
We will forsake our countries. We will leave our motherlands behind us and become one with this earth. We have no nation, no philosophy, no ideology. We go where we're needed, fighting not for country, not for government, but for ourselves. We need no reason to fight. We fight because we are needed. We will be the deterrent for those with no other recourse. We are soldiers without borders, our purpose defined by the era we live in. We will sometimes have to sell ourselves and services. If the times demand it, we'll be revolutionaries, criminals, terrorists. And yes, we may all be headed straight to hell. But what better place for us than this? It is our only home, our heaven and our hell. This is utter heaven.
Number of warheads detected by the dew line.
Hello, Snake. It's been a while, hasn't it? I hear you've been causing quite the ruckus in Nicaragua. Nothing much to report from my end. The legacy's being put to good use. Or so they tell me. But enough with the small talk. There's something I need to tell you. You saw the photo that came with this tape, right? The boss gave that to me. 10 years ago. I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner. I probably should have told you right away. But sending it to you hasn't been an easy decision to make. It's taken me 10 years. Once you've heard what I have to say, you'll understand why. That photo belonged to her. I know what you're thinking. What does she have to do with this? You've probably seen it 100 times in the press already. Obviously, it's of the Mercury 7, the first group of American astronauts, the heroes of Project Mercury. But there were actually 8 people in that photo. One of them was edited out, erased, without a trace. That 8th astronaut, the one airbrushed out of existence, that was her, Snake. Now, why did they need to keep her existence a secret? What were they trying to hide? The answer goes back even further. 17 years ago. It was the height of the Cold War. The Eastern and Western blocs were racing to develop space technology to match their nuclear arsenals. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite. The Americans were stunned. They'd been led to believe their country led the world in science and technology. That shock quickly turned into fear. If the Russians had the know-how to launch a satellite into space, they could use it to launch a nuclear missile, too. Frantic, the U.S. threw everything it had into the space race. The following year, the Army succeeded in launching the first American satellite, Explorer 1. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration was established that fall, and Project Mercury with it. The goal was to send a man into space, and 7 men were chosen as pilot candidates. The media dubbed them the Mercury 7. They were immediately hailed as national heroes, icons of Western space exploration. But after Explorer, America suffered a series of failed rocket launches. Desperate, the government made a fateful decision. Unable to wait for its space program to mature, they'd steal the Soviets' technology, at the same time sabotaging their space program. You know better than anyone how hard a mission that was. The Soviet space program was shrouded in secrecy. Recovering that information would be no easy task. Using the help of an insider, they'd insert a sleeper agent into the research institute, or else recruit one of those insiders to do the job for them. And, if necessary, the mission leader would have to go in and sort things out themselves. Someone was needed with experience, knowledge, and superior intuition. And the only one for the job was the boss. The president himself asked for her by name. He needed someone who could be trusted with the fate of a nation. Who else to turn to but the hero of the Second World War? It was June 1959. So you see, Snake, that's why she left. That was the top secret mission that took her from you. But her selection ruffled a few CIA feathers. They didn't appreciate the president going over their head like that. The mission was tough enough already, and now the CIA was dragging its feet. She couldn't get anything out of them. No manpower, no information. Left to her own devices, the boss made a decision she knew would come back to haunt her. She decided to tap into the Philosopher's Network. And that's when the wheels of fate began to turn. The Philosophers were a secret society of power brokers formed in a pact between the US, Russia, and China in the early 20th century. Of course, by that time, the American and Soviet branches had already parted ways. But there were those among the remaining Russian philosophers not entirely happy with the one-party communist state. The boss reached out to them. She arranged clandestine meetings in Berlin, hoping to find a way into OKB-1, the Soviets' premier design bureau. She worked tirelessly to win their sympathy, in some instances using huge sums of cash, in others by helping them over the Berlin Wall. It was a dangerous game to be playing. The Philosophers had everything on her, and not just information either. She'd given birth to a child on the battlefield, only to have them immediately snatch it away. I know she told you that story. If that child was in the hands of the Soviet philosophers, she'd be putting more than just herself in danger. But she did what she had to do. At the time, the Soviet Union was believed to have an arsenal of missiles far greater than that of the United States. If that proved to be the case, Moscow would be free from the yoke of nuclear deterrence, raising the possibility that the Soviets might actually launch nukes if they felt it necessary. As you know, the so-called missile gap turned out to be a Soviet bluff. Moscow had gone to incredible lengths to perpetuate the lie. In fact, the whole space race was really just a part of an elaborate ruse. Only we didn't know that at the time. She used to joke that even she swallowed the whole missile gap story, hook, line, and sinker. She put her life on the line, for the sake of her country, to prevent nuclear war. And it was because of her sacrificial efforts that America succeeded in placing a sleeper agent inside OKB-1. NASA began to receive huge volumes of technical data from the Soviet program. By the end of 1959, they'd succeeded in sending a chimpanzee named Sam on a ballistic rocket flight. The rocket never left the atmosphere. But all the same, it was a huge success for NASA, restoring confidence in its technology. Then, just when the operation was starting to produce results, the CIA came calling. "You're a war hero," they said. "No need for you to dirty your hands with this sort of black ops. We'll take it from here." In effect, they wanted to reap the rewards for themselves. But the boss didn't object. "My part is over," she said. "I don't care what you do with the data now." It seemed as if NASA was making great strides toward manned spaceflight while the Russians lagged behind. They even got a report from their mole at OKB-1. "The safe return of Sam has sent our scientists into a panic," he said. Soon afterward, the Soviet Union sent an animal of its own into space on Sputnik 2, the dog Kudryavka, better known to the world as Laika. But Laika was fated never to return to Earth. The U.S. can recover its spacecraft from the ocean upon re-entry. But the Soviet Union only borders the frozen Arctic. They had to bring their spacecraft down on land. How could they soften the impact enough to bring a living creature back safely? The agent reported that the Soviets hadn't yet found a solution to that problem. The plot to sabotage the Soviet space program seemed to be working, too. First, they tampered with Sputnik 4's re-entry. Then, 2 months later, one of their rockets exploded on the launch pad. They did manage to send 2 dogs into orbit aboard Sputnik 5 and return them safely to Earth. But the agent dismissed it as a fluke. Dogs, sure, but humans? They didn't have the technology. Everybody believed it. Everybody was complacent. Everybody. Except the boss. There was something about the Sputnik 5 schematics they were getting that didn't seem right. Some kind of ejection device on the capsule that didn't quite belong. She couldn't figure out the reason why it was there. What was it supposed to eject? NASA shrugged off her concerns. They figured it was probably meant to eject the flight recorder in case of an accident. The boss pleaded with them to investigate, but the CIA wasn't having it. They probably thought she was trying to reclaim some of the glory for herself. The boss wouldn't give up. She decided to head to the Soviet Union herself, alone, without any backing from the CIA. By the beginning of the next year, 1961, she'd succeeded in infiltrating OKB-1. That's when she saw the truth, for the first time. The sleeper that she'd worked so hard to place was a double agent. He'd been turned by the Soviets and was feeding the Americans lies. But what shocked the boss even more was why. The CIA's access agent had been taking a large cut of the sleeper's pay. The sleeper felt what little he was left with wasn't worth the risk. When he got a better offer from Moscow, he took it. At some point, the Americans' intelligence operation had become an open book to the Soviets. And contrary to what the sleeper had been reporting, the Soviets' manned spaceflight technology was quite advanced. It wasn't until she infiltrated OKB-1 herself that the boss learned the truth about Sputnik 5. After the spacecraft re-entered the atmosphere, it ejected the pilot, seat and all, at an altitude of 7,000 meters. It was the Soviet solution to the problem of land recovery. The mystery device attached to Sputnik 5 was for that purpose. The pilot would parachute down from that high altitude wearing a bulky spacesuit. Crazy, I know. The Soviets knew exactly how dangerous it was, of course. So much so that they gave Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space,
a special 2-rank promotion before re-entry. Only Moscow could come up with this kind of plan. With total state control over information, they could easily pretend it never happened in the event of a failure. The boss passed the info on to NASA. It was their worst nightmare. The glory of mankind's first spaceflight was about to be stolen from them by the Soviet Union. It was Sputnik all over again. And the CIA was caught no less off guard. Their ineptitude had caused the fiasco in the first place. The Soviets' deception was brilliant. They'd woven a masterful tapestry of truth and fiction to convince the Americans their intelligence operations were proceeding as planned. No one but the boss could have seen through it. It was obvious the Soviets had some gifted minds working on their side. But that certainly didn't excuse the CIA's massive failure. The CIA wasn't done, though, and devised an ingenious plan to avoid taking responsibility. Luckily for them, a new president had been elected the previous November, John F. Kennedy. As he didn't know the case history when taking office, the CIA was able to feed lies to his new administration. They masked their own failures, placing the blame squarely on the boss's shoulders. After all, she'd selected an unreliable sleeper. They claimed she'd failed to make use of one of the most effective means of controlling a sleeper agent's actions: holding their family hostage. The boss was well aware that would have worked. She told me so later, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. It seems clear it had to do with having her own child taken. She could never inflict the same pain on anyone else. The CIA used that against her. In his election campaign, Kennedy had vowed to close the missile gap with Moscow. If America lost the space race, that promise would be worthless. The fact that the president had no links to the philosophers only made things worse. He was completely unaware of the secret networks she'd used to complete her mission. In his eyes, she was no better than a traitor. The fate that awaited her was cruel beyond belief. The order came down from above. The boss would take the official blame for the sleeper's betrayal. More so, she'd serve as the guinea pig for NASA's manned spaceflight program. By then, NASA had gotten as far as sending a chimp named Ham into space. Now came a whole battery of ground tests to pave the way for a human to take its place. High-G tests, zero-G tests, spacesuit tests, simulations in pressurized oxygen environments. Some of the tests were highly dangerous, too dangerous for the Mercury 7, who were by then already media darlings. So the boss was made to stand in for them. She could have refused the order, argued her side of the story against the CIA, but she didn't. The way she saw it, her military experience made her a potentially valuable asset to those tests. She felt it was her duty to accept. She soon proved herself right. The boss was more than just a guinea pig. She drew on her experience to give the staff focused advice exactly where it was needed. NASA's space program took off again. At the rate they were going, putting a man in space seemed within reach. The higher-ups at NASA were impressed with her talents. They took to calling her the 8th astronaut, the Mercury Lady. The photo I sent you was taken around that time. I suppose maybe they were planning to use it as propaganda, the world's first female astronaut. But then, just as things were looking up, they hit a new snag. The government told them to add a window. There were no windows in NASA's spacecraft back then. Ham never saw the stars around him. But Washington insisted. Their sources told them Soviet spaceships had windows. Space exploration as a form of propaganda in itself. After all, what was the point of sending a man into space if he couldn't tell the world what he'd seen? Most of all, though, they simply couldn't have the Russians doing something they couldn't. It was sheer madness, and everybody knew it. NASA was already facing impossible deadlines. Now they were adding yet another element of uncertainty to the mix. Installing a window would both weaken the spacecraft and make it harder to shield the occupant from cosmic rays. They weren't about to put their Mercury 7 golden boys in that kind of danger. So the boss was chosen as the pilot instead. Even if she made it up into space, she was given less than a 20% chance of returning to Earth alive. But she took it in stride, even helping them make the necessary design changes to the Mercury capsule. It was like going to work every day at NASA to make her own coffin. Then, without warning, the US received intelligence that the Soviets had moved their Vostok spacecraft to the launch site. The launch was set for the following day, April 12th, 1961. America couldn't let the Soviets beat them with Vostok. NASA was forced to cut short the testing process and move the launch date up. They pulled out all the stops to get it scheduled for the earliest hours of the next day. The spacecraft would be launched from Cape Canaveral in the dead of night. For the flight path, they chose a course that would take her as far east as possible. She'd be able to see the Earth in daylight from the window, at least for a little while. The boss climbed into the Mercury capsule, having completed less than 80% of the regular flight procedures. Both the timing and the flight path were risky, and testing was far from complete. But NASA had no other choice. The boss, for her part, never expected to come home alive. She was going on a one-way trip, the American version of Laika the dog. And yet she went all the same. "Someone has to be first," she said. "If fate has chosen me, then I accept, for my country, for the balance of the world." That's how she saw things. My chances may be slim, but I'll take them. I've accepted my fate. If anyone can get through this, I can. Then, on April 12th at 1:30 in the morning, the boss entered space. It was nothing short of a miracle. First, that she'd made it in an incomplete spacecraft. And second, that her flight coincided almost exactly with Gagarin's. As the sun rose over the horizon, and cosmic rays began to bombard her through the window, she saw the Earth. I think you've heard the story before. It was a world without borders, a perfect jewel. All nations, all ideologies. They seemed so far away. It almost made her laugh, knowing that they'd risked so much to beat the Soviets by a few short minutes. If she'd seen Vostok from her window, she probably would have waved. But the two spacecraft were destined for very different fates. Gagarin circled the Earth and returned to the Soviet Union, safe and sound. The Mercury capsule, on the other hand, deviated from its planned re-entry angle. The addition of a window had thrown the capsule's aerodynamics off balance. The boss's coffin veered wildly off course and began to plunge earthward. The course deviation caused the capsule to miss its splashdown point by a wide margin. It didn't have enough time to decelerate before crashing into the sea. The force of the impact shattered the spacecraft before it started to sink like a stone. The boss used the last of her strength to escape to the surface. Her body was covered in bruises and scorched by radiation. It was a miracle she was still alive. She slipped into a coma and didn't regain consciousness for 6 months. To some, what was worst of all was that she had lost the space race to Gagarin by only a few minutes. That aside, it should have been a proud day for America. Its first manned spaceflight. Sadly, her accomplishment was kept out of the history books. An attempt to save face by Washington. In contrast to Gagarin's orbital flight, America had only managed a ballistic trajectory. Her flight time was much shorter, too. And most importantly, the Soviets had brought back both spacecraft and pilot safely. NASA couldn't even conjure up a half-hearted tale of heroic survival. The coup de grace, though, was the Soviet propaganda campaign that kicked into gear after the flight. The Earth was blue. Those were the words of Gagarin on his return, and the whole world was listening. In the blink of an eye, Gagarin was an international celebrity, earning accolades from every corner. It was a PR coup for the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, Washington could only grit its teeth in silence. They decided there was no value in making the boss's flight public, that it would only make matters worse. So they buried it instead, labeling it a dark mission. NASA and the CIA did everything in their power to erase all traces of the boss from Project Mercury. The result was the photo you see before you. Not a bad job, huh? Not only did they expunge her flight from the records, they denied that she ever existed. And that wasn't the end of it. As an alibi, the military claimed she'd taken part in the CIA's botched Bay of Pigs plot to take back Cuba. And when the boss was finally well enough to return to service, they wouldn't take her back. She was forced to go underground. In the public eye, the boss was still a hero of World War II. In reality, though, she was anything but that. She was a non-person, fit only for the blackest of black ops. In effect, she may as well have been dead. Gagarin went on a worldwide tour in front of millions of adoring fans. The boss, meanwhile, was a walking secret, unable to breathe a word about her experience. The authorities in Washington had this to say: "Why are you still here? If only you'd had the decency to give us a nice quote like Gagarin and then die an honorable death, you'd have gone down as a hero." 3 weeks later, on May 5th, Alan Shepard, one of the Mercury 7, made his own ballistic flight. They sure didn't try to cover up his achievement. Of course, he owed his success to the lessons learned from the boss's tragedy. Before sending Gagarin up into space, the Soviets had used a mannequin called Ivan Ivanovich to test the landing procedure, which would make the boss America's version of a crash test dummy. But she didn't care. "I'm happy to be the dummy," she said, "if it'll help the project succeed. Nothing would give me greater satisfaction." And that still wasn't the end of it. The boss had worked through the anti-Moscow faction of the Soviet Union's philosophers to place the sleeper agent, and at some point, the Soviets found out about it. Yet the Americans remained oblivious to the end. Even the philosopher network the boss plugged into never tipped them off to the double cross. That could only mean one of two things. Either the pro-Moscow philosophers had intervened, or the anti-Moscow philosophers had been turned. Either way, it was a situation their American counterparts couldn't stand. To preserve the philosopher's good name, and to repay her debt, so to speak, the boss once again made her way into the Soviet Union. There, she found herself face to face with the Soviets' own agent. And who should she find awaiting her return to Russia? The one who'd turned her sleeper against her, who'd fed them lies all this time. It was her former comrade in arms, the father of her child, the man known as the Sorrow. He didn't know it was the boss who'd set the sleeper, Or to be more precise, the Soviet philosophers never told him. Former lovers, forced to fight to the death. One would live and one would die, she told me. That was the revenge the Soviet philosophers had in store for me. If both of them survived, their child would suffer in their place. They were left with no other option. The boss shot him. He offered no resistance. When she returned from the Soviet Union, there was no place left for her to go. She'd sacrificed everything. Everything. For her country. And in return, they treated her like a dead woman. She was made a scapegoat for no good reason. Only because power had changed hands in Washington. Any lesser being would have long since cracked. It was then that one of her old SAS comrades reached out to her, Major Zero, and so Fox was born. She undertook a mission that, well, you should know better than anybody. You are a part of it. 20 days after Shepard's flight, President Kennedy announced that America would put a man on the moon. Without the intelligence the boss obtained, America's space program would never have caught up. Armstrong and Aldrin might never have walked on the moon, but the Americans' gain had cost the boss her health, her honor, and the man she loved. The word tragedy doesn't even begin to describe what she endured. The Soviets continued their manned space flights, and in 1963, Valentina Tereshkova became the so-called first woman in space. It's said they took their cue from NASA's long-buried Mercury Lady project. And so that, Snake, is the mission that kept her away from you for so long. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why not use me as her agent? She knew I'd never even think of betraying her. I think it's because she didn't want to drag you into it. She probably knew what was going to happen. To complete the mission, she'd have to turn to the philosophers, and once she did that, whatever came of it, there'd be a price to pay. No one understood that better than her. So please, Snake, let it go. When she gave me the photo, she left me to decide whether or not to pass it along to you. I know she was torn about it, just as I was. She knew you'd probably blame yourself. Why did she hold on to it for so long? That, I can't say. To remind her of how much it hurt to be erased. She wasn't that kind of person. No. I think she meant it to be a message to you. She had her identity, her life, taken away. But she wanted you, of all people, to know the truth. Snake, you've probably already figured this out, but it's no accident that I'm only now sending you something I've withheld for so long. A little bird tells me you recently made a big decision. You and the boss are different people. I understand that. And I'm not trying to second guess you. I simply wanted you to know what she saw, how she felt. That's all. Keep it with you, Snake. Keep it deep inside. Don't ever forget the path she took. Because you and I are the only people on this earth who know the truth.
Boss, I'm sorry.